Machine Head's Rob Flynn is a divisive character in metal's history, to say the least. From putting down some of the 90s most notable albums to his outspoken political headbutting over Phil Anselmo's wine-induced debacle, there are more stories than even I realized when hovering the magnifying glass over the icon's career. But my favorite Rob Flynn stories are the tales orbiting around a selection of his guitars, as they're some of the most wholesome and satisfying in heavy metal history. The thrash metal fever Rob Flynn caught in the 80s would drive him to become peers with some of heavy metal's biggest legends, and what seems like an abundance of bad luck and misfortune has resulted in the best back-in-my-day tales that I think any heavy metal icon has in their arsenal. From beginning to end, it includes drunken destruction, theft and despair, and insane cosmic alignment, providing the perfect ending to the whole thing. With the release of Burn My Eyes in 1994, Machine Head would enter a wave of groove metal domination alongside the likes of Sepultura, White Zombie, and of course, Pantera. It was a movement that many in the modern day describe as metal music's salvation after Metallica's departure from thrash metal and entrance into the mainstream with the Black Album. Flynn and Machine Head would see themselves among icons, and by the mid-90s were called up to be part of all manner of tours and festivals as metal found its footing in the new decade, putting them naturally in a backstage area with groove metal pioneers Pantera. Now, look, I've waxed all sorts of poetic about Pantera and the chaos of being in their presence backstage. Metal icons of all walks of life have said the same, with the common thread being, if you were on the road with the Cowboys, you were gonna have to keep up with the partying. And as Flynn tells the story, we end up at Ozfest in 1997. The whole thing was a party.
You know, nothing could prepare you for the extrovert that Dimebag Darrell was.
Dime and Vin are legends when it comes to throwing them back, and at the height of their mythological run, releasing iconic records like Cowboys from Hell, Vulgar Display of Power, and Far Beyond Driven, which debuted at number 1, Flynn would have the chance to take it all in firsthand. Being amongst some insane acts like Fear Factory, Typo Negative, and even Marilyn Manson, Flynn and Machine Head would pretty quickly become friendly with the Abbott brothers, as their legendary Southern hospitality took them in, as it does with many others. Hitting it off at Ozfest would lead to Machine Head being recruited to open for Pantera.
So we hit it off, and we kind of broke down with those guys, and then they've just released 101 Proof, the live album. And so they're going on tour in support of that, and they asked us to support them in America, so we go out and we support them.
The party only continued, and at the tour's biggest stop in Detroit, Michigan, after a hard night of drinking that had not yet ended, a particularly sauced Dimebag Darrell would stumble onto the stage during one of Coal Chamber's sets. It would, of course, fire up the crowd, as Rob was watching stage side a short walk from his gear, and in the name of fun and whiskey, Dime would play into the crowd work by picking up Flynn's backup guitar to wobble back onto stage with, miming with it before smashing it to pieces in true rock star fashion. With it being early on for Flynn, he didn't have many guitars to begin with, so it was a bit of a bummer to have one of them taken off the roster, and he was not happy.
All right, thank you, everybody. And he picks up my guitar, and he goes head stock first, right into the ground. And I was like, dude, I was pissed.
The next day, sobered up and feeling guilty, Dime was mortified that he'd broken the axe and immediately apologized to Flynn, giving him double the cash value to make up for it before apologizing again. He slunk off feeling terrible, and at a later show, armed with a prototype Washburn Dimebolt, a model of guitar that would go on to be Dime and Washburn's best-selling of Abbott's signatures, gave it to Flynn as a further repayment and did it all in front of the crowd as further penance for his road rule sins. It would become one of Flynn's most cherished guitars, and for good reason, as both bands would go on to have healthy careers in music before, well, we know the ending, and I don't need to detail it again.
So we go out front, partially to kind of just go, hope it's okay, and partially just to see the train wreck that we're probably about to witness. And that dude gets out there and literally plays a flawless show. Doesn't miss a note. Like, it was like, if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, like, I never would have believed that someone that who'd been drinking for 24 hours straight at this point could play, and he killed it.
Fast forwarding to 2010, returning home after picking up his young son, Flynn discovered that his Martinez, California home had been broken into and ransacked. Among the items taken from the house was the Ibanez Flynn used in studio for Burn My Eyes, a mini flying V he had given his son, and his prized Washburn Dimebolt. It was a haul that stripped decades of sentimental weight and value from Flynn that was going to be impossible to replace, and as social media and the internet became aware of the story, it would serve as a viral headline across metal-centric communities. Strictly monetarily, the thieves ran off with around $20,000 to $30,000 worth of items and left the home damaged, requiring repairs and a hefty security upgrade. And local authorities failed to take any of it very seriously until Rob applied pressure, with his son now being terrified to sleep alone, thinking more break-ins were going to happen. Flynn was obviously upset for a multitude of very valid reasons beyond the simple material loss, but he expressed in later tellings of the story that he always knew the Dimebolt would eventually make its way back home. As a very public topic of discussion, support would come out in droves for Flynn and his family, with everyone offering their condolences given the powerful sentimental value that was lost, and the even bigger loss that was the Flynn family's sense of security and safety in their own home. One metal legend who went the extra distance to help Rob in the aftermath of the robbery would be Metallica's James Hetfield. In response to the robbery and recognizing the impact it took on Flynn and his family, James would gift his signature ESP JH1 Green Flame V as an elevated gesture of support. And while it obviously isn't a replacement for anything, it would stand as its own cherished relic, given to him by yet another foundational figure in heavy metal. It was a heavy emotional moment for Flynn, receiving the guitar at his front door from Hetfield's assistant. In Hetfield's book Messengers, a look into the guitar vault of one of metal's most iconic, he would detail a bit about his motivations behind gifting this rare load and reload tour-worn V to a fellow headbanger in need. Knowing firsthand the feeling of having all your gear stolen, I imagine referring to Metallica's early 80s smash and grab that resulted in the loss of an amplifier given to him by his late mother, he knew all too well the feeling of having sentiment stripped away from you and the aftermath it can bring to your soul. He described gifting a guitar as a transference of energy, and with it being in such a lucky spot with an abundant collection, he sent off the road-worn V to try and help repair some of the psychic damage and gave Rob Flynn yet another amazing tragedy-turned-triumph story to tell. But there was still an even crazier act of the story waiting to unfold over half a decade later. It would turn out that Flynn's intuition that the Dimebolt would make its way back home was prophetically sound.
When you buy storages and stuff, you're always looking for the Holy Grail, the Mona Lisa, whatever, the Hope Diamond, rifling through junk, and I bought it for $10.
Holy shit.
There was no other bids on it.
In some kind of freak cosmic alignment in 2016, a California woman named Holly Cherry purchased an abandoned storage unit, hoping to flip the contents to make a profit. In that storage unit, she would strike gold, as it would contain an unreleased Epiphone prototype signature guitar, autographed by Machine Head's Rob Flynn, settled right next to a Washburn Dimebolt. It was clear these were valuable, and it wouldn't take long for Cherry to uncover the backstory and discover that these guitars were not only stolen, but iconic pieces of history that desperately needed to be reunited with their owner. 6 whole years had passed, and from what I'm able to find, it doesn't look like they ever caught the people who committed the break-in, with it being more likely that Flynn's claim of the authorities not taking the matter seriously meant he was left to track his lost relics down himself. For years, Rob would get contacted about possible recoveries, and with the story being such a widespread tale across rock and metal social media, there were quite a few false leads and dashed hopes. So when Flynn received an email from one Holly Cherry about her storage unit discovery, it would absolutely blow him away when serial numbers and pictures confirmed to him that at least the Dimebolt had finally been found, resulting in an awesome reunion that Flynn would share on social media.
Returned the Dimebag guitar that got stolen from me 6 years ago. This guitar was given to me in 1997 by Dimebag Darrell, and I've cherished it for a long time. I was pretty devastated when it got stolen. This is an Epiphone prototype that was also stolen that day. I had 4 guitars stolen that day, and but it had my name on the back, so.
Which was dang helpful.
Yeah, right. But this came back to me. Dime's looking out somehow,
right?
Somewhere.
That's what you had to have gotten us together somehow.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Along with showing the world his gratitude and thanking Holly for rescuing the guitars, he followed through with the cash reward offered at the beginning of the search. Unfortunately, from what I can tell, the Ibanez and other guitars stolen in the 2010 burglary are still out there somewhere, hopefully just a cosmic discovery away. But with 15 years having passed since they wandered off the ranch, it's probably a slim chance they're ever going to make it back. But with the clear level of insanely good or bad luck, depending on how you look at it, that Flynn has, it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if they completed the long journey home. Outside of just him, a guitar in the hands of pretty much anyone has the chance to become attached to stories that will go down to tell until the day we die. And while these are simply a sampling of tales to be told, they're some of my favorites to dig into, and my shorter retellings of them seem to indicate that they're some of your favorites as well. Flynn isn't the only metal icon to report a close friendship and admiration for Dimebag Darrell, as the position of Dime had a big heart and was a great guy seems to be the default takeaway that most of these legends have. A sentimental item having that level of connection with its owner makes the almost magnetic way that it was returned to Flynn cause you to question whether we're in a simulation or if the DMT aliens Joe Rogan talks to were determined to give us a satisfactory end to the story. At a time when people seem more divided than ever, it's stories like this about music, memory, and meaning that remind us why we care so deeply about these instruments, these legends, and these moments. My favorite part of telling these stories is seeing the demographics that are normally at each other's throats coalescing and conversing like a unit in a way that I'm fairly certain we're doomed to lose.